Welcome to Tell Me Your Story, New Paradigms for a New World. I'm Richard Dugan, your host. Thank you so much for joining us here on the program. Today's program has an interesting backstory to it, ladies and gentlemen, and it seems like it's going to fit really well into the context of our conversation with our very special guest. His name is Ben Lytle. He is the author of the Potentialist, and actually we're going to be talking about that. The book I have in my hand, of course, is The Potentialist 2, The Pursuit of Wisdom. Ben Lytle has been on the lips and on the tongue of many of my guests, as well as myself, when it comes to making it through our day-to-day. Thank you so much for joining us in spite of, or maybe even because of, the challenges that you and I have faced, actually more me than you, but nonetheless, just to get to this moment. And I shared with you my philosophy when there's a challenge to an interview, and that is that just means it's going to be that much better. Thank you for being with us.
You bet. Happy to be here, Richard. Thank you for inviting me.
I love this because I was actually thinking about this. In a world where only those who really thought they could make it, The Potentialist, now in theaters. Seems to me. Yeah, remember Don LaFontaine? Oh my gosh. In a world where this is fascinating because this is a series of books, The Potentialist.
Correct.
And what I think that I find so fascinating is the actual title itself, The Potentialist. To have the potential. We might have the talents, the skills, the abilities, the capacity, and so forth. But it seems like to have the potential for doing something, it's almost as if the door has to open up. And that is where the potential is, through that door. Take those tools and those abilities. Talk to us about the origins of the name, The Potentialist. And then we'll talk about who that is. Right.
Well, it's the origins lie in the origins of the book, and so for me, my life in pursuit of human potential, beginning with my own, began at very young, at 20 years old, with a transformative event in a college class when a professor said. Paraphrase, because this had been many, many years ago. But he said, look, you should not try to be anything anyone wants you to be, including society, your parents, or anyone else. You should be, you are who you discover. You need to discover who you are and live that person, and that will make your life successful. And for me, that was a transformative event, and it really opened the doors to what does human potential mean. And working with this professor, I got open to ancient works going back 5,000 years, and so really became a student of human potential. And that really guided was my North Star, and it's the way I looked at myself. And the way I looked at my career, entrepreneurial opportunities, what leadership meant was helping people discover potential in themselves. So that was the story. And I had a very incredibly successful career. Along the way, I learned the inextricable relationship between human potential and wisdom and good and wise decisions, which we definitely want to cover with you today. But that's how I got here. And the potentialist came because I was always talking to people about we can do finding what we're capable of, as a group, finding what we're capable of as an individual. And at one point, somebody said, "Man, you are a potentialist." and I kind of laughed at the time, so I do not think of myself as the potentialist. I am a potentialist, which means I've committed to myself to reach my potential, and that's guided my entire life and guided these books. This book series started because I've also been a futurist. When I looked at potential, really going back even before that college class, I was always fascinated by the history of humanity and where we were headed. So I was always involved in the future and looking at the future. And that also played a huge role in my career because I was considered being a guy who, saw where things were headed and built businesses just in the right time. And it's worked for me. So 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 when I really started to about and so I track I grew up through technology. I came up as a technologist, became a chief information officer very young, and in part the reason these things happened so young to me was because I had developed my wisdom early, and people saw in me many of my leaders and managers and mentors said, "You're old beyond your years." And that was not an accident. But so I came up as a technologist. I was in management at 20, mid-management by 25, built my first company at 27, became a CIO at 34, 36, a chief operating officer of a billion-dollar company, and at 42, it's CEO, and then went on to build 7 companies to date and working on number 8. And so that was how it affected my career. But 10 years ago, because I tracked this stuff, I started to realize that we were getting ready to go into a world that even the brightest people around really didn't see yet, that it was going to be the greatest change in human history. And as I see it, an expansion of human potential. It's a great thing. But to get there, we're going to have to adapt to it. And human beings are not really good at adapting to rapid change and profound change.
Mm.
And so, and previous times in history that we went through this, the Renaissance, the Enlightenment, 3 prior industrial revolutions, a lot of people, some people, the fast followers, the pace setters, they did super. They thrived. But a lot of people didn't. And there was nobody out there to say, hey, here's what you need to do. So I was looking at it first just for my own family. And I said, my adult children are bright and successful. I have these wonderful grandchildren, but they don't get this yet either. So I set out to write a white paper to tell them how to adapt, what's coming and how to adapt. And as I got into it, I decided I needed a professional editor because the white paper was getting big. It's actually turned into 3 white papers. And he and some other people who read the material said, you should publish this. This is something the public at large needs to see or have the opportunity to see. That's why I did it. I never intended to be an author, never intended to do this, but I felt like this message was so important. And so that's how I got here.
Well, to me, this is fascinating because I start thinking about my career and the some of the philosophies that I've incorporated over the years, and there aren't a lot of them, but one of the first ones was work with what you have until you get what you want.
Mm-hmm.
And I find that a lot of people wait and wait and wait until, I don't know, technology or the industry catches up to where, I don't want to, for example, in my industry, of course, when I got into the business, we had vinyl, we had reel to reels, we had cassettes and so forth. And as time went on, of course, we transferred into CDs, compact discs, for both actual audio CDs as well as data storage. Now it's like a CD, really. We just transfer it via the cloud. And those are the processes. Although I will tell you that I do miss kneeling before the audio gods with my splicing block, my China marker, razor blade, and splicing tape. I sort of kind of miss those days. Those were fun days. But I remember when at the radio station I was working for, we got our first computer. And my boss, I couldn't believe he said this to me. He says, and you are not to touch it. And the next thing I knew, in 94, I was building them from the ground up or the tower up. And I began to understand better how they worked. And then I got my first audio editing program and played with that. And I'm still using the same program. It's under a different name now. I was an AOL subscriber back in the mid 90s. And the program was called Cool Edit. It is now called Adobe Audition. And people have tried to get me to change. Oh, you ought to try this one or that one or the other one. And they're all basically the same. And I say, look, in one of the trade magazines, I was looking at the BBC and what they were using. And they're using the same thing I'm using. So if it's good enough for the BBC, it's good enough for me. But a lot of people, they keep waiting and waiting and waiting for the right opportunity. But I want to throw in something in the mix here, and I want your input on this. In 2006, my wife and I were both unemployed. And we decided at some point there in March of that year, let's move. I mean, we were living in Phoenix and we'd been to Ireland twice. We thought, well, let's go to Ireland. Well, the resources would go a lot faster if we did that. So we said, how about Santa Barbara, her hometown? And okay, took a week, came over, and the doors opened up for us to make the move. And we've been here for 18 years. Now, one of the things that hit me, Ben, is that we didn't necessarily have to wait, but in the waiting and then the process in those next 2 or 3 months, I had no fear of the process. I wasn't afraid of not finding or finding a job, those kinds of things. I trusted the universe. I trusted my intuition. I'm curious as to how much of that element that's within each one of us you trust in your life as a potentialist to guide you forward to where you become part of the process and you're not trying to control the process.
Well, it's implicit, and one of the things that I've done in this lifetime of study of human potential and wisdom is I've interviewed hundreds of wise people, some of them famous, some of them doing menial labor, but they're very wise people in the ways of the world. Because as you know, or I'm sure you do, knowledge and education are not necessarily prerequisites for wisdom. In fact, you can be wildly educated and be a fool. And so but in all of the people that I interviewed who were wise, what in my language and the language that they used one way or the other, it's really understanding the rhythm of life. And that life has a rhythm to it. And sometimes you have to wait, sometimes you have to speed up, but you need to pay attention to it and let it happen. Because if you start, and first of all, what you said is so important, fear is never going to guide you to the right decision. So decisions made out of fear, other than get out of the way of the car, something like that, that's right. Something like that is when you have to trust your instinct, but human anxiety, and conscious anxiety is not usually going to help you much. So that was always a wise decision, and not making decisions out of fear, not making decisions out of feeling I'm seeking an illusion of certainty, and I'm seeking an illusion of this is going to be perfect if I do that. That's just not the way life works. Mm-hmm. And those are simply illusions. So once you start to, and they're actually called cognitive distortions of the ego. And there's a whole list of them. And that's what analysts spend a lot of time helping people unwind from, because they're distortions of reality. And a part of wisdom is learning to see reality as it is and learn how to work with it, which is what you're talking about.
Mm-hmm. What website do you want people to go to find out more about you as well as the Potentialist, the book too, in this case?
Oh, yeah, it's called PotentialistFuture.com. And then I've got a big presence also on LinkedIn and Facebook and, those kind of things. So, but there's a lot of video out there. There's a lot of video and the e-learning site, PotentialistFuture.com. It is an e-learning site. So it's intended, there'll be continuous content added to it around the material of these books, but explaining it on video is in addition to the books.
Mm. We
So
encourage
if
it.
you
We'll be,
something in the book, you may have noticed there's QR codes in the book. So
yeah.
there's places where I knew people would struggle with it, with maybe more than others, and so it takes you to some video there where I explain some of that, in addition to what's in the book.
You also talk about, as we have discussed, you talk about this aspect of the future, and one of the things that strikes me, we are looking for those new ways of living. I mean, this is one of the slogans that we use, or one of the phrases, however you want to put it. We're looking for those new ways of living because the old ways don't work. All you have to do is look around you. Well, one of my guests in my statement about how, we need to tear down the old institutions and build new ones. And my guest said, no, 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 no. You do not tear down the old ones. You build the new ones that make the old ones obsolete.
That's right.
Now, without getting into any of the mindless conspiracies that are out there over COVID and 2020, 21, 22, 23, and so forth. I have to tell you that it drives me to walk away. I was going to say it drives me to drink. No, it doesn't drive me to drink. It drives me to walk away. When people start talking about all of this stuff, because it's like, and so if it is a conspiracy, there's nothing you can do about it. So you need to.
And I will tell you right there, because it's so important to bring this up.
Yes.
What you're seeing when you see people today so polarized, and you see people chasing conspiracy theories, is fear of the changes underway and the pace of change and how life's getting more complex, which is real. Their fear that they won't be able to cope. And so what I said before, they chase the illusion or the distortion of certainty. And so they make up an answer that for them answers how they get through this. But it most cases makes no sense at all. And it's a falsehood anyway, because there is no such thing as certainty. And so, and it's the wrong answer. The right answer is that there are more than one ways to the future, and that the tensions that we have actually help us find compromise. That's what the whole thing was built for. That's the way our minds work. When we equally balance both sides of an argument, and we pay attention, that tension between those two choices creates energy. That energy is creative energy, and that's how we come up with solutions. So in our own lives and in the political lives or in the world. So the reason I make that argument, and if anyone's saying, "Well, I don't believe that," then ask why the polarization we're seeing is not the United States, it's worldwide. Why is it worldwide? Well, because everybody's going through this rapidly accelerating change. It's making them anxious or making them fearful, and then that causes them to gravitate to solutions that they can find. And what we're going to have to do is have the patience to get through this. We're going to have the patience to get ourselves through it. But going back to your thing about this, your question about the institutions, yeah, there's a force called democratization. It's a change force. It's been around since the beginning of time, and everybody can relate to it if you think about the printing press. Democratization takes something that is, and start with the point that change has direction. So all of this change that seems chaotic actually has a very specific direction.
Mm-hmm.
One of them, democratization. And what democratization does is it's innovations that take something that's available only to an elite few, makes it available to many people, and ultimately makes it available to everybody as a commodity. It's been happening since the beginning of time. Probably happened with fire and everything else, but the easiest one to relate to is the printing press. Prior to books being, at that point, prior to the movable type printing press, books were handmade. The only people that could afford them were the clergy and the royalty, and a handful, perhaps, of very wealthy people. Mr. Gutenberg comes along and said, well, I think it'd be better if everybody could read. And particularly at that point, the Bible, which was the first thing he printed on a contract with the church. And the church thought, well, that's probably a pretty good idea. 50 years, and at that point, most people in the royalty and the church felt, why would people need to read? I mean, we'll tell them what they need to know.
Yeah.
Why do they need to read? But he read the demand, and he was an innovator, and he was driven to democratize. Within 50 years, there were 8 million books in Europe alone. And then democratizing innovations trigger others. So out of that came a demand for literacy, to democratize literacy. Out of that came the demand for public education. So you see how that chain reaction sets off. Well, we're in a period right now where we're having huge democratizing innovations, and that's putting pressure because the institutions are not set up for that right now.
Yeah.
And so they're struggling. They're out of touch with their own constituency. And anybody wants to question that, just ask yourself, name one institution, government, education, religion, healthcare. Name one that's more respected today than 10 years ago. You won't find any.
Nope.
That's not a happenstance. That's this force of democratization. And more recently, of course, we can see that's what's happened to publishing. I mean, the creative output is what's happened in movies, Netflix on your own. That's a democratizing kind of innovation. It's done it to movies, music, and it's going to do it ultimately to every business and every product in the United States. And it has very specific characteristics to it. And if you're leading a business, you better be thinking about how I get mine democratized, because that's where, or else somebody will do it for you, a competitor.
One of the things that, and thank you for sharing that, because that really is part of this whole aspect of looking for those new ways of living, and that no one, not even myself, I've been doing this program for 17 years, but I've been talking to people in interviews for nearly 45 years. And one of the things that I've come to the conclusion, because I consider myself more of a metaphysician on the spiritual side of things, and I'm a firm believer myself in the fact that we're all connected and that we all affect one another. We are all affected by one another. And one of the conclusions that I have come to, and again, just my observation, is that when it comes to the elements that are spoken of, for example, in the founding documents of the United States of America, and it is said that, and I haven't done any study on this, but it has been said that the United States was initially founded as a republic. All right. And that made reference to, individual rights. And we have like the First Amendment and so on and so forth. And as things have evolved, and I'm going to use that term, over the last few centuries, we have been referred to as a democracy, not mob rule, but the fact that the collective, we the people, we, not I the person, but we the people, are more powerful together. And even the supposed documents they say that the founding fathers adhered to, i.e. the ancient wisdom teachings as the Bible, speak to the fact that we're all, as it says, we're children of collectively we're children of. We were all created in the image of, and so forth. And I think that one of the questions that I have asked, and I love for your input on this, has to do with this, and you've talked about it already in the fact that there's this transition period that we're going through. The late Barbara Marx Hubbard, I've had on this program back in 2007. She was one of my very first programmers, my guests rather, and she talked about how we're going through birth pangs. Now, I was hoping it was only going to be 9 months, but it's been going on for a long time. But that eventually the baby will be born and it'll be a beautiful thing. But in the meantime, we're going through these things, and it's kind of what you're talking about.
Yeah, there's been these periods throughout history. So this is we know what to expect. If you go back and look at previous industrial revolutions, Renaissance, Enlightenment, you know what to expect.
Yeah.
Hard times, difficult period, then it births a new age, and that new age lasts until the next new age.
Right. But the supposed dichotomy, or I don't want to say contradiction, but just the juxtapositions of individual rights and freedoms put up against as it says in the Declaration of Independence, or the preamble, I should say, promote the general welfare. Well, the general welfare refers to all of us, not individuals, but all of us as a collective unit. Promote the general welfare and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and who? Ourselves collectively, that's plural, and our posterity, our children. So then I would ask the question, and this was back in 21, 22, even 23, how do you, the individualist, how do you balance your individual right to do whatever you want whenever you want, because you say you have the right to do it by the documents, versus supporting, protecting, defending the populace, the people that are around you, your children, your family, your friends, your co-workers, the citizens in your community, in your town, and so forth. And that's something that popped into my head when you were just talking about this.
Yeah, right. It's not an either or.
No, I'm not saying that, but I'm just saying that.
Yeah,
that
you have to face every decision.
Yeah.
With the balance, and it always comes down to the same balance, individual versus the collective. And so that tension between the individual and the collective is there for a reason, and that gets us to make the right decisions as we navigate the future. And that was what the founders intended, but this predated. This stuff is 5,000, 7,000.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So that tension every one of us has to carry. And for us individually, it comes down to decisions like this. I get a new job offer in another city, and my spouse really loves where we live. Now, do I do what's right for me? And do I push her to do against something she doesn't want to do? Or do we hold those two and say, okay, here's the two lives. Let's talk it through and let's see if we can find a compromise. And that's what we all live through every day. So and that is right there is one of the key aspects of wisdom, that you never look at you're wrong, I'm right. You're off base, I'm not. You really try to understand the gist of the truth in each position, and then hold it and look for the best possible solution. That's really simplified, but at the end of the day, that's what a wise decision is.
Yeah. My brother and I had a conversation. I won't go into the details, but at the end of the conversation, we were both on we are both on what we'll call opposite sides of the political spectrum. However, at the end of the conversation, we both agreed on 3 things that needed to be worked on, needed to be fixed. Now, we didn't necessarily agree on how to fix them, but we did agree that, these are the 3 that really need to be dealt with, because we felt they were the most important elements and it was It took on a sort of a political conversation. But I remember at the beginning of that conversation, knowing the direction that it could go, I said, you know what? It doesn't matter where this conversation ends up. He is still my brother. He's neither right nor wrong, just as I'm neither right nor wrong. We both have our own perspectives, and he
Right.
will always be my brother.
Right.
And
And you know, the big, excuse me, go ahead.
good. Well, I was just going to say, and that to me is missing from a lot of these conversations over the last 8 or 10 years, where people they'll divorce their spouse, they'll disown their children or their parents, they will move away from a community that is has totally opposite perspective instead of, and I learned from my brother some things, not specifically I learned some things about him. No, he has traveled the world because he worked for Disney, working building different amusement parks for the company. So he's lived in some of these places.
Yeah, and what we've lost in the last few years, and we'll regain it, I think, because what's happened historically is people ultimately exhaust themselves with this,
Yes. Yes.
so they'll ultimately wear themselves out. Hopefully, not before they do anything really stupid.
Yeah.
But what we've forgotten, and what wise people inherently know, is sometimes it takes patience. Sometimes there is no solution presently.
Mm-hmm.
And no solution can be crafted that will be an acceptable compromise. But you also have to realize that my way is probably not right either. And I can't get it done. And, we've forgotten here in this country, and you can't rule with 40%. It's going to be an unhappy democracy, and all you're going to do is go through one administration that changes everything, and then the next administration changes it back. That's the worst thing in the world for the economy. It's the
Yeah.
worst thing in the world for people's stability. So we need the patience to understand some things we will just have to accept, to agree to disagree right now, but
Mm-hmm.
not demonize each other, and
Yeah.
say in time, because often the answers come through innovation.
Yeah.
The answer to many of these things often come through an innovation that causes us to now say, "Oh, yeah, we could do that." And so we just but we'll never get there demonizing each other. And so my hope is that people will begin to realize that that's how you do it. And I want to make sure we carve out time here for me to be clear about what
Please.
I'm trying to do
Yeah.
with these books. I am not partisan anything. I am trying to say that you have no choice but to adapt to what's coming.
Mm-hmm.
Being fearful of AI or the environment or whatever you're scared of is not going to get you anywhere. What
Yeah.
you have to do is say, all right, it is coming, and what the only thing I have control of is how I individually adapt.
Mm-hmm.
That's it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so, and if I fail to adapt, if I live in fear, if I live in pessimism, if I live in anger, whatever it is, it's not going to get me there. There is one way to adapt, and I laid it out, the first 7 steps in the first book. And then I've laid out in this book, the answer is you can reach your own potential. That should be your pursuit. And I define it very clearly. And you can develop a capacity for wisdom and make better decisions. And at the end of the day, that's what defines your life, is your decisions you make.
Yeah.
And that's what wisdom is. Wisdom is the art of living well.
Mm-hmm.
That's the classical definition. What's the art of living well? It's making better decisions most throughout your life.
Yeah.
A good life.
Mm-hmm.
And so then how do you make better decisions? You develop the capacity for wisdom. And I'm very specific about how to do that in the book. And in the moment of decision, you make sure that you are free of the things that'll cause you to make an unwise decision. Your ego, biases, and instinctive reactions or emotions that will cause you to act unwisely. And a good way to visualize it is think of a great judge. A judge who maintains their neutrality, looks at both sides, weighs the consequences. That's what you're trying to be about your own life.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
you can absolutely do it. And it's not only my books, but there's going to be software to help you do it. There's going to be software apps that will help you make in the moment decisions, allow you to receive guidance from the greatest philosophers in history, have dialogue with them,
Mm.
large language model, and work through problems and find other people who have had similar problems to yours and talk them through. That technology is coming. So we're going to have we're going to have a requirement. This new world we're going into is going to require us to make better decisions, live more wisely. We've done all we can do with information and knowledge. We've been doing that 600 years. It's now a commodity, right? It's
Yeah.
on our phones all around us, and even with large language models, it's even easier. So we've done all we can do with information and knowledge. That's what the cover to the first book said. The real next step is for us to learn how to use all that information and knowledge wisely for ourselves and for others.
Yeah.
And that's what wisdom is. And so if you apply yourself, read this book, follow it, you can do it. Anybody can do it. There is no magic here. Any age, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Any education level, you can learn it.
Ben Lytle is my guest. We're talking about The Potentialist, and book 2 is The Pursuit of Wisdom. And the website is potentialistfuture.com. And this is Tell Me Your Story. I'm Richard Dugan, and it is really a pleasure to have you here on the program, Ben, to talk about this subject of The Potentialist and your 2 books here. As a matter of fact, book 2 has been published here in October of 2024. So this is brand new, and you can go to the website, potentialistfuture.com. One of the videos that I was watching is one of these short, and we're talking 10 seconds. It was not long at all, but it was the verbiage that I found so humorous and yet so accurate. And basically it said, you know how they used to say that it was people that the lack of information was what sort of created stupid people? Well, we were wrong, because now we have all the information in the world we could ever possibly want, and we still have, and I'm not trying to be pejorative or derogatory, but we still have some stupidity that is going on around us in spite of, or maybe because of, overloaded.
Let me suggest something. Instead of calling people stupid, which implies an absence of intellect,
Mm-hmm.
say they make unwise decisions.
I'll go with you there. I'll go with you.
Wisdom can be taught, and so anyone can choose. You choose to be unwise. You don't choose to be because any person, regardless of as long as they can cognitively function, can learn how to make wiser decisions, live a better life. And
Your
that's
Honor,
what
I'd like to retract the word stupid from my statement, Your Honor. I want to ask you about the subtitle here, The Pursuit of Wisdom, because in our founding documents, it talks about how we have the pursuit of happiness. It's one of our inalienable rights. And I asked one of our guests about that, and I said, do you think that the founding fathers knew something about this concept we call happiness? And of course, no one can make another human being happy. It's all about choices. Right. But you've chosen that subtitle of The Pursuit of Wisdom, as opposed to like in the founding documents, is the inalienable rights of life, liberty, and I jokingly say, and happiness. No, I'm sorry, the pursuit. We don't get it. We don't get to just have it. We have to pursue it. So here we are pursuing wisdom. In many
ways they're synonyms.
Yeah.
Because I've never, of the hundreds of wise people I spent the time to really get to know and understand why they were the way they were, I never met an unhappy one. Now, that doesn't mean you go, one of the things that a lot of, as you know, a lot of young people, but it's not just young people, sometimes older people do it as well.
Mhm.
They interpret happiness as la la. It's I'll never be challenged. Everything will be easy. That's not life. Life will always, every action has an equal and opposite reaction. So every advance we make will meet resistance. That's the way the universe works. That's the way nature works. So we can always expect challenges. We can always expect some adversity in our life. But if you're wise, you look at that adversity as a teacher. What's it here to teach me? What can I learn? And if you do that, you just get wiser because you'll learn something every time. And that's what nature does. If you watch how plants and animals grow, they don't get to sit out. There's no wind. There's nothing. There's always something challenging anything that is a living thing. And so that's why happiness to me can be an illusion in the way we use it. It's really not, because, as I said, most wise people really are very happy with their life. They're great. I'll put it this way. Gratitude is central to being a wise person. If you can't feel gratitude because for the blessing we have to live in the time we have, most of human existence, people were barely beyond starvation. And if they were lucky enough to not starve, they were praying there wasn't a horde coming over the hill that was going to mow them down with arrows or swords. And that's been a lot of what life has been. We live in a time it's not like that and hasn't been like that. I'm a generation that really has not. We have not had a major ground war since 1993, and we probably won't have one again, hopefully. So that's we have to remember we live in a wonderful time. And if you start your day with gratitude, end your day with gratitude, you'll find you're really quite happy.
I've also heard it said too, especially when it comes to some of the challenges that we, even as a society, face, that our actions are not dependent upon whether anybody else in another part of the world is doing what we are being asked to do. And I put it in the along the environmental realms. Everybody is upset over the fact that, well, China's not doing this and India's not doing that and this country's not doing this. So why should we be doing this? And it's like, I use the example of a family like my family. We grew up in Phoenix, the 8 of us in a 3-bedroom, 1-bathroom home, and every weekend we would be given certain tasks to do around the house to clean the house up, for the coming week. Well, it wasn't dependent upon whether our neighbors did that or not. We did that for us, and that's why I often say to people who want to sit there and argue science and so forth over this whole thing they call climate change. And I'm saying, look, whether, I don't care about the science. Shouldn't we clean up our home? Well, but this country's not doing it and that country. So what? And so why my wife and I, where we live here in Santa Barbara, above Santa Barbara in the mountains, we do everything we can to keep our area, our little acre and a half or whatever it is that we occupy. We try to keep it clean. We try to make sure that the fire dangers diminished by the guidelines that they've set and so forth. Not a big deal. I don't want the house to burn down and lose all our stuff. And it's not dependent upon what anybody else does. And I sometimes wonder if some of us have sort of lost our way in that regard. It's like, why should I eat right? Nobody else is. I mean, the obesity rate went from, I think it was like 1% in 1960, according to the stats, to where it's now over 40%. It might even be higher.
Let me suggest that there is a central theme when you start talking about whether you want to reach your potential or not.
Mm-hmm.
There's a simple place to start. And it's something that I suggest people do. It's a commitment to yourself. There's no club to join. There's no coffee cups to buy or anything like that. This is just a commitment to make to yourself. And you can pick your own words if you want, but the important thing's the meaning. Because again, every wise person that I ever delved down into in some way said the same thing. And it's there, and I think it is the ultimate and only true measure of success.
Mm-hmm.
That is that I commit to myself every morning. I do it still today, every morning and every night when I go to bed. I check myself to see how I did. I will do my best to be my best and leave the world and the people I meet along the way a little better than I found them.
Mm.
Now, and then when I lay down at night, I say, how'd I do? Well, I think I did this. I could have probably done that a little better. And people often ask me, well, how do I know it's my best? And I say, you'll know.
Mm-hmm.
This is between you and you. And you know, life cannot ask any more of you. And you shouldn't ask any more of yourself than your best. Right. And look in nature, every animal, every plant is driven to that. They are instinctively driven to be their best, to fully flower, to grow to their best, to survive. We're the only ones that have a choice. And that's the choice we have to make every day. If you do that, you will feel successful. When you lay your head down at night, you'll feel like, okay, I've done my best. That's all you can give. And it will be your North Star. It will ultimately become your North Star.
I heard an actor make this statement at an awards ceremony where they said, I always wanted to win one of these. I don't even remember if it was an American Music Award or an Oscar or whatever it was. And I thought, is that the reason why you're doing what you're doing, is to get the accolades from the fans or your peers or the industry? And I have to tell you that there were times as I was growing through this industry myself in the last 45 years when I thought, well, where's my World Series ring, or where's my Oscar, or where's my, and I thought, and I would always go back to this. If that is the reason why I'm doing what I do, I need to find something else to do, because it doesn't matter.
Successful people will tell you that.
Yeah, it's in here.
You have to do, yeah, and it goes back to that statement. Whatever your best is, discovering what your best is, living your best, that will guide you. And what I predict in these books, and it's actually the last chapter 11 of the first book, is all about the new definition of success. Money, fame, power, appearance, social status has been what's been there for a long time. And there's nothing wrong with those things in and of itself, as long as it's not what drives you. Mm-hmm. But if it's a benefit, that's great. But again, what should drive you is that you commit to your best and you commit to be all you can be. Mm-hmm. If you do that, those things will come. That was one of the things I learned from this professor in some materials he had me read, and I went back and discussed with him. That what you and I have just talked about, they were having those discussions 5,000 years ago, and they were advising the wisest people, and young people they were training. Let this be your drive, not because, and particularly as we live longer, as the world changes faster and you go through multiple, not just jobs, but multiple careers in your life, you can't guarantee any of those things. You cannot guarantee any of those. But having done your best is rock solid.
Yeah. Yeah. My father, he told me many years ago, he's since passed, Richard, you need to find something that you love doing because you're going to be doing it for a long time. Don't get stuck like me. It was the last part of that was always intriguing to me because I never thought he got stuck. Mm-hmm. He went back to junior college after working for a company for many years, a printing company. Interesting, you brought up Gutenberg and the printing press. I learned how to set typeface back in high school in one of the vocational clubs. But the company moved to Utah, and he didn't want to move the family. So, he went back to school, got his computer programming degree, and then he moved on. He continued to move on. And that was about the time that I started to build computers. Anyway, so I never believed that he ever got stuck. He never stopped. And that's the one thing that's always stuck with me. For example, in our interactions today, on this day of this conversation you and I are having, I had a few challenges that I had to take care of, a few issues regarding the radio station that I work for. Nothing horrific, but I have an interesting post observation of it and sometimes other things like that. For example, I take the car in to get the oil changed, and they do the whole thing, and everything's good and everything's fine. I get in the car and I drive away, and I get this feeling of, oh, I feel like I'm driving in a new car. Or for example, I just published my book, and I've been working on it for a long, long time. And it's like I have something new. It's like when I have those kinds of experiences where I meet these challenges, and now I'm on the other side, even in the context of health, where I had my gallbladder removed. And I would tell myself as I'm going through that process, you're going to be on the other side of this before you know it. And I was, but I felt like I had a new lease on life. Not that I suppose it could have killed me, but needless to say, it's as if there's this sense of newness to life when I get through those challenges, when I meet those some might even call them obstacles. And I don't know. It's kind of weird. It's like when the power goes out here. When it comes back in, I'm excited, not just because the power's on, but because, oh, this is nice. This is a beautiful thing. And there's a newness to it. I'm trying to share that with other people, that when you get through it, try to look at the newness. It's partly of what you talked about earlier about gratitude.
Yeah, I'm not sure if there was a question there, so I didn't.
Let's just have you respond to that.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think you're right. Obviously, we don't get joy, or we don't grow if we go out onto a football field and we run from one end to the other by ourselves, because there's no players out there. And nobody knocks us down, and we have to go past them and overcome that. We don't enjoy. We none of us go out. If we're really looking for some challenge and a nice hike, we don't go out there and walk down the highway. We look for a trail that has some elevation, and it's got some challenges, some beautiful views. So that's all of those metaphors apply to our life. If you're looking for if you define success, and if you define happiness as no adversity, you're going to be disappointed, and it wouldn't be rewarding anyway. I've known a lot of very wealthy people in my life, and still do. The people who have been the most miserable were the people who had no meaning, no challenge to overcome. They are some of the most unhappy people I've ever known, because their life there's no purpose. Yeah. And and that doesn't mean you have to be a martyr and suffer. No, you can look for a good life, but almost look for something to challenge you and take you to the next level. Mm. And by the way, one thing I do want to mention, because it's if we didn't cover this on the show, I would have missed it. And that's, what is potential? So I gave you what wisdom is, right? Mm-hmm. Wisdom's the art of living well. The art of living well is making good decisions over a long life. You make good decisions by developing the capacity for wisdom. That's perspective, seeing reality, life as it is, and really sharpening your depth of inquiry on a subject, and then applying it in the moment of decision. And applying it in the moment of decision like I said, you have to be free of your ego. your biases, the things that would cause you to make not a real balanced and thoughtful decision. When you do that, that's your potential,
Mm.
right? Because the hard things in life are making good decisions. And when you do that, you're at your potential when you do balance those things and you are free. So, and every time, here's the beautiful thing. Every time you do that, every single time, whether it's a little decision or a bigger decision,
Hmm.
and you do that, you become wiser
Mm.
and you never go backwards. And over time, you find you're making those all the time. You're naturally making the wisest decisions that serve your interest and others and advance and do and that you were free in how you made that decision.
Two final points I'd love for you to address. The first one, and I'll keep it real brief. The importance in the process of the pursuit of wisdom, but also the being a potentialist
Mhm.
and trusting one's intuition.
Right.
Talk to us
Yeah.
about that.
Yeah, there's a thing I love about our psychological process and the way it integrates with our body. In that, and we all know it. We use these terms all the time, but we'll say somebody's in their head. Well, that means we're pretty much in our ego, and the ego's not all bad thing. It's there's some good there too. It's
Right.
the can do,
Mm-hmm.
but we're in the head, we're in our head. Well, okay, that's where, just think of that as that's where the ego lives. And then when you say, my gut feels telling me this, gut feel and intuition are the basically appear physically the same, or they are the same thing. So what that says is my mind may be telling me to do X. My gut is telling me Y. And where's that come from?
Mm.
Do you see the tension it sets up? Remember,
Mm-hmm.
I said everything in life, every single thing is the tension between two opposites and finding the right place.
Mm.
And guess where halfway between your gut and your head is? Your heart.
Your heart. Yeah.
And so when you make that decision, I said, you make that, you struggle with the decision and you make that wise decision where you're free, you'll feel it in your heart.
Mm.
That's where the heartfelt comes from.
Ah,
It
yeah.
means it means I know I did the right thing.
Yeah.
I know I did the best thing that I could do. I had to satisfy difficult opposites, but I did my best. That's how you know I'm operating at my potential, is when it feels that way all the time.
Another area I want to touch on before we wrap things up here has to do with a book that I was given by one of my bosses back in the 80s. And you may be familiar with the book. It's called Who Moved the Cheese? It was made
Yeah, I've
mandatory
forgotten.
reading. What's that?
Yeah, yeah, I've pretty much forgotten it, but yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So I read it
Move the
and I
cheese.
took it back into my boss and I put it on his desk and I said, "Thank you. I understand the concepts. I just have one thing to say about that. I don't have a problem with somebody moving the cheese. My issue is with tell me where you moved it so I don't have to search around for it." Now, that's sort of a counter to what the message of the book is, but it has to do with change.
Mhm.
And change is the one, there are probably others, but it's the one constant in the universe. And this
Right.
is where you have been talking about this aspect of adapting.
Yep. Yep. Don't you have to meet it with pragmatic optimism. Pragmatic optimism means that you have a thoughtful reason to be optimistic. It's not Pollyannish.
Mm-hmm.
And so my books are heavily researched, and I make a case. I make cases for why the recommendations I make, and so we have to be pragmatically optimistic, not pessimistic, and not fearful. And you just go forward with calm courage. And a great question to ask yourself is, am I strong enough for pretty much whatever life would throw at me? If you can answer yes to that, you can be fearless. and they're wonderful stories. And again, so many wise people, when I ask them, are you a fearful person, or do you get, and of course everybody's natural to have a little bit of something, but fear never dominates them. And too many people today are dominated by their fear. And a lot of those fears are unrealistic because they're things they can't control anyway or influence anyway.
Mhm.
You have to stick with, first fix yourself. And so I think the more we can look at change and say, come on, bring it on. I'll I'll adapt, and it's going to make a better world in the end. The only question is, am I going to make it harder on myself by not adapting? That's
Exactly.
it.
Ben Lytle, my guest, The Potentialist, Book Two, The Pursuit of Wisdom, and potentialistfuture.com is the website as we continue here on Tell Me Your Story. I'm Richard Dugan along with Ben Lytle, and we are talking about being a potentialist, ladies and gentlemen. And I hope that you will go to the website, potentialistfuture.com, and find out more about what Ben and I have been talking about here. Ben Lytle here on Tell Me Your Story. Ben, I have, first of all, three final questions that I want to ask you. But before I ask you those questions, I want to thank you for giving us so much time here on the program. And again, though folks don't have all the details, for your incredible patience on this particular day of our conversation to bring this conversation to fruition.
Well, thank you. No, I'm happy to do it, Rich. I'm happy to do it.
I'm going to go ahead and ask you those three final questions, and they are in order. I ask this of all of my guests, have been for 17 years. Who is Ben Lytle?
Okay. Oh, you want one at a time? Okay. So yeah. So I am first of all a father and a grandfather, and I am a potentialist in that I really do look at life through the lens of opportunity and the lens of potential and the lens of gratitude. I truly find I'm in the last quarter of my life, if not the last 10 yards. And I am incredibly happy and fulfilled and full of energy. And both physically and mentally, I think I'm at the peak performance of my life.
What gets you up in the morning?
The joy of the life that I live. I get to work on this incredible work that I find very rewarding. I have wonderful people that I love in my life, and I'm blessed with all of them. Great friends, and beautiful family and loved ones. And so I'm joyful for that, and it's really easy for me to get up in the morning.
Mm.
Uh, it's so easy. I can't wait for the next day, and I love it. And that's not Pollyannish. That's just the way I am. And anyone that would go out and check comments by people who've known me for half a century or many decades, you'll find that they all say the same thing.
Mm. And finally, what was your best day?
Ooh, wow. I don't know. I have so many because I mean, the days that my children and grandchildren were born and I got to hold them as tiny little welcome them into the world, and commit to them that for the rest of your life, you got me. Those were all blessed moments,
Mm.
incredibly blessed moments.
Mm.
Wonderful times with my friends and my adult children. But I would say I also try to keep some close in. So last Friday night, uh, last Friday night, I water skied, slalom skied behind a boat at 78 years old.
Oh,
And so
wow.
So that was kind of fun. And then
Well,
we had a wonderful bucket of chicken and watched the sunset. So it was an incredible evening. So these are all just they're all a wonderful collection
mm,
of memories. And again, I have had a blessed life, and I'm so grateful for
mm.
every day of it.
I'm just curious, sidebar question on that skiing. Was there any fear?
No, no, no. There was respectful caution.
Ah,
At my age, a hard fall would not be pretty.
mm-mm.
But it didn't stop me. I was cutting back and forth and doing the being pulled the speed I normally have over many years,
Mm.
and so it was actually glorious. The hardest thing was saying, okay, you've had enough. You've done it. That's enough. You don't need to go an extra mile.
Yeah,
Just
yeah.
take the win, buddy, and relax.
Mm.
But it was great fun. It was
Yeah.
great fun.
Well, I'm 64 and my mind is 17, but my mind is in spite of the fact that it would like the body to do those things that were good when it was 17. I am mindful and respectful that the physical body, as in good a condition as it is,
Right.
like you, it's like, okay, let's not break it.
Yeah, because then you're acting foolishly and
Yeah.
unwisely,
Yeah.
and you just can't afford to do that really at any age, but particularly as you get older, because you don't recover if you get
Yeah.
hurt. It's hard to
Exactly.
recover.
Well, once again, Ben, I thank you so much for being a part of what we're doing here to try to change the world and make this a better place for everybody. And I'm excited for that. And I also want to thank you for listening to and watching Tell Me Your Story, New Paradigms for a New World, where we are giving you choices and knowledge of those choices to help make your dreams come true. Until our next broadcast, podcast, videocast, love to Lal. Jeanette, I am still listening. Dad, continue to be happy because I am. Smokey, I will see you on the other side. And to my dear friend Zorro, aho, aho.